Hello everyone, my name is Scalti, and today we're going to be looking at a guide to create 30 encased steel beams per minute at 100% efficiency. I hope you enjoy. Alright, to get this build started, let's go over a couple of things to note. As you can see in front of us, it looks a little different than our traditional guides that I put together in the past, but we'll get into that in a moment. Let's first take a look at the right side and look at our list of items that we are going to need to complete this factory. We're going to need 8 MK1 Miners, 12 Foundries, 18 Constructors, and 5 Assemblers. Now, I'm going to note there is a somewhat of an asterisk on the MK1 Miners. If you are to use MK1 Miners, they need to be placed on a pure node. Because a pure node on a MK1 at 100% power, or clock speed, will give you 120 ore per minute. Now, what you're going to need to do if you are using a MK1 miner is overclock on a pure node to 200%. We need, for this, in terms of ore, or raw material, we need 480 iron ore, 480 coal, and 450 limestone. So what that means is if you have the MK1 miner on a pure iron node or coal node, overclocked to 200%, it will give you 240 ore per minute. So you need 2 of those because you're going to be transporting 240 ore at a time per belt, which means this will also require Mark III belts. Now this is for encased steel beams. I will also have a simple steel foundry guide available as well, but I figure at this point you will be able to at least have access to the Mark III belts. If not, you can definitely use Mark II for now and operate at a slightly lower efficiency until you can reach this point. And the reason why I'm doing this one first is because the encased steel beams are used for Mark IV belts down the road, and you'll still be able to get product from this factory that you would ultimately need to even complete it in the first place, because in order to make encased steel beams, you need steel beams. The encasing part happens from the concrete. So inherently, this factory will go from a steel beam factory to an encased steel beam factory. So you might not have immediate access to the Mark III belts or access to Mark II miners, but you can technically also get away with using Mark II miners without having to overclock on a pure node, or depending on the environment in which you are building this, you can use a Mark II miner on a normal node overclocked to 200%, because the default for a Mark II miner on a normal node is 120 ore per minute. I know this is a little bit of an extended introduction, but I felt that it is necessary to note some of the key specifics in the necessity of what you'll need for this factory and why I'm kind of doing this weird skipping of steel beams and steel pipe sort of situation straight to encased steel beams. So with that being said, let's get right into it. And also, as an additional disclaimer, be sure to stick around at the end of the video. The belting in this does get a little interesting. Even though I have built it before, I'm probably going to make some mistakes. And if I make a mistake, that means there's going to be bloopers. So with that, stay tuned and let's get into it. So when it comes to the foundation of the factory, we're going to need a 5 by 13 area. And it's going to be a little longer this time around because the foundries require a whole entire foundation space in between them in order to get them to line up with the conveyor walls below for the input. Additionally, you can see here, rather than just building on our normal, what would be this walkable area here of the factory, we are now creating a pit that is 2 walls in height, recessed down below. This is going to be where all of our belting takes place, because each foundry at 12 foundries of 2 inputs is 24 total inputs plus the 2 concrete 2 lines of concrete that we have coming in as well. Now, when it comes to these inputs, I will quickly show you. Essentially, we have a somewhat of a bus system bringing in 2 belts of each resource in on Mark III belts, and those are just coming in below the walkable area, so that way it's kept nice and clean. And that just simply goes in underneath and through to the core with an 8x1 foundation on top, and then also we have some wall outlets to allocate electricity from the factory itself out to the miners bringing the ore into the actual factory. So for the concrete, we have them currently in the middle on the long edge, and then the iron we have coming from over in this direction and the coal from the opposite. Now, depending on where you build your factory, this might not be the actual location for the inputs, but you at least have an idea of how they are coming into the system. So with that, let's go ahead and get our walls in place in our foundry setup, so that way we can start doing some belt work. So on the top edge of the pit is where we're going to be placing our walls to hide everything in the middle away. So we're going to be starting with foundries at the very end of each side, and that's going to require the walls with 2 holes for conveyors. And then in between, as I mentioned before, we need a whole entire foundation space, and then we just repeat the process until we get to the end. On the short end here, you can do normal walls. Rinse and repeat. And then on top, we just put in some 8x1 foundations. And then on top of those, we put in our foundries. Now, I personally would recommend, and it's not necessary this time around, but having them hang off by 1 step, so that way when we place our lifts, which we can just do simple Mark 1s, that when you place them, you can hear the snap or the beep. And that means it's snapping directly to the conveyor wall, and any belts we attach to it, there's no additional belt work necessary. It just keeps it nice and clean, and also it just looks good. So we repeat that process for the other 11 walls that we have. Get them belted up. Just like that. It already looked, dude, the foundries look so good. It's already starting to look great. I love it. All right, so now it's time for the fun part. Load balancing all the inputs into these foundries. So let's head down into the middle. Okay, so for load balancing, first and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to take an 8x4 foundation and place it 3 foundations away from the short edge of where our inputs for our coal and iron are located. Next to each of those, on the long edges, we're going to take 2 more 8x4 foundations for each one and place it side by side, so that way we have 3 foundations on either end. Now what we're going to do on top is we're going to take a splitter and place it into the corner, and on this instance, the input is over here, so furthest away from the input that we're going to be dealing with. Repeat that on both sides, and when placing it, you want it essentially on the quadrant or corner of the foundation. And then all we have to do is take a Mark 1 lift, since the input is less than 60, place it on the, essentially what I'm doing for organizational purposes is focusing on the furthest most input from where the actual item is coming from. So that'd be on the left ones facing this side, and then the right facing the opposite. Now when you place these lifts, you can hear the beep, which means it's snapping to that splitter, which means we don't need any additional belt work. That middle input is complete. On the edges here, or the ends, you just take the Mark 1 belts and bring those into the splitters, and now those 3 are complete. And what's nice, based on the alignment, you can see it's a nice 90-degree bend, no awkward angles or anything of the sort. So get these other 2 belted up just like that. I'll take a pause quick here so you guys have some reference. Cool. Now when it comes to the inputs, we're going to take 2 splitters, and in the quadrants furthest from the wall, we're going to split there and split here. Then we're going to finish the input into the splitters, and then we're going to take in front of each splitter, we're going to take a lift. So we will use the Mark III lifts here and place them as far against the foundation as you can. Bring that up, face it away, repeat the process with the other splitter, then complete the belting into those, and there you have it. 6 inputs are complete. Once that's done, get rid of the foundations on the sides here, because we're going to need to route some belting underneath. Then we also have the additional, also get these connected up, that would definitely help. And then from these splitters here, what we're going to do is curl around and against this wall and place a lift here, like so. And this will be just next to the silver grate here, and as far over as you can, and then bringing them essentially as high up as you can and facing the inside. Repeat that on the opposite end. We are being as symmetrical as we can for the moment. And then we go ahead and take belts and connect these up. And so to quickly kind of run through the math here, we have 240 ore on each line. That 240 from this splitter gets split into 2 lines of 120. So this line is 120, this comes up. It's a splitter into 3 different directions. 120 divided by 3 is 40, which means we have 40 ore going to each of these 3 foundries. So essentially all of these foundries will be receiving 40 coal and 40 iron to make 40 steel ingots per minute. Okay, so we have that side done. Let's go ahead and repeat the process on this side. That's on the wrong foundation. Okay, simple enough. We have that now complete. And now it's just a matter of taking the 2 lines here and bringing them over to these 6, and then taking these 2 lines here and bringing them over to these 6 over here. So for that, what we're going to do is take another 8x4 foundation and build that up twice right next to the initial one we built 3 spaces away. And we're going to take the belts and bring them all the way over in line, 1 step in from the edge. And what that'll allow us to do is now bring them down using lifts and just face them directly into the middle. Repeat the process on the other side. You can leave these foundations in, you can take them out. I like to take them out so that way I can see everything. Looks more complex, looks like I'm smarter than I actually am. And that's that. Now, it's just a matter of getting these to route to the opposite ends in a somewhat symmetrical pattern. And so what I like to do, and let's see if I can remember off the top of my head here and not make a mistake, I'm going to take the stackable conveyor pulls, and it's not on my hotbar for some reason. Put that back on there, very end. Okay. So on one side, or one input from one end. We're going to put a conveyor pole in the middle and then repeat the process, but asymmetrically. Repeat the process over here on the side. Just give you a quick pause to get a visual reference to pause at. And so essentially what we are going to be doing is we're going to be taking the one that's in line. We will go ahead and bring it up. And then bring it over. And then bring it down and in line to the middle here. Remove this foundation. And then, as you can see, we have the input here. We're going to take our splitter, place it here, bring this over, and in. So now what we can do is take another lift. That can, excuse me, that connects to this splitter. Take another splitter, or I'm sorry, another lift, and bring it over and just face it in. And then over on this end over here, bring that down and face it in as well. And then we just simply connect these up in hopefully a nice 90-degree manner. Close enough, I guess. I don't want this guy to take too long, and I don't want to spend forever in a day getting it just right. So I'll go ahead and try and mimic the other side. You can get that input over to there. So now we have those sorted out. And now we're going to go back and we are going to take this one and route it underneath here. And bring this over. So like we did over here. Take another splitter. Place it here. And we can connect this up. And then again with our lifts. And you kind of get the idea. It's just a symmetrical lift pattern, if you will. Nothing terribly complex, but I hope it does make some resemblance of sense. That seems relatively... oh, it's terribly symmetrical. And then repeat the process as needed. Again, bringing this one down. Moving the foundation, splitter. That is essentially everything load balanced in a relatively, use that word loosely, relatively, oh, nope, I lied. I have to bring this belt over. In a relatively symmetrical manner. It's not perfect if you want to take the time to do so, but essentially that's generally how I route it. A little bit more TLC, you can get it looking pretty nice. And again, it looks a lot more complicated than it actually is. We're just taking one input, separating it into 2, and then separating it into 3. It's a 1 to 6 load balancer, and that's pretty easy. So, with that, let's go ahead and take care of our concrete coming in, which is right here. And the wall above it, going to replace it with a wall conveyor. 2 holes. Bring our lifts in. Use Mark 3 for sure. Come back out. And also, by the way, with the use of ladders, these builds have become a lot easier in order to do without modding, or modding to fly. Alright, so now we have our concrete, essentially will be coming out of here, up to our sandwich layer. So with that, whoa, hello. We'll get our sandwich layer in place after we get our belting for the foundries done. So the foundries are fairly simple. Essentially, we're going to be breaking them apart into groups of 3. So that's 4 groups of 3 because we have 12. And so what we're going to do is take mergers in front of the end 2 or end 4 on each side and face them off into the short end direction like so, and lined up in the middle here so you can kind of see this light blue or the blue snapping line essentially. And if you need a reference, that is essentially where a little bit of autosave lag, where the input for the double wall conveyor lines up. So that's where we kind of want it. You can kind of see this groove here in the wall. So you just want those to be lined up, and repeat the process on both for each side like so. And then these 2 or these 4 in the middle, don't need them because they're going to be feeding into these other mergers. Flip your mergers around into the opposite direction like so. Get these belted up. And then to get the 90 degree, you can see there's a slight angle, so just bring it out and all the way over, and you're golden. Make sure you at least, if you're trying to min-max in terms of belts and resources, you need to use the Mark IIs at this point into here. And that's all you really need, because the total group output of 3 of these is going to be 120 ore. Or I'm sorry, 120 steel ingots. Because we have 40, again, 40 going to each foundry, so 40, 80, 120. Let's go ahead and get these ones belted up as well. Okay, those are all belted up, and now we can start our very first sandwich layer of the build. So what we need to do is take an 8x4 foundation, and essentially this point from the very middle, because we do have the clearance issue, build that up 4 times, and then take an 8x1 foundation and build it next to the top 8x4 on the side of it, and then build it down. And this is to match the height of an 8x4 foundation, at which point you can now get rid of the 8x4s and the 2 8x1s in the middle, and we are now left with our sandwich layer. We got the top, we got the bottom. So let's go ahead and build this out to the space below, which is the 11 by 3 space. Essentially wherever there is no walkable area, or that this walkable edge, do not build over top of this. And when building the sandwich layers, you want to make sure you build both the top and the bottom before doing any belt work. The splitters and mergers that we use will cause a clearance issue if you build those first before building this top layer. The splitters and mergers, for whatever reason, can clip into the foundations, but the foundations cannot clip into the splitters and mergers. So we have our sandwich complete. I'm sorry, we have the sandwich part complete, but we need to now build on top of it. And so what we are going to need, we will need 10 constructors for the concrete, and we will need 8 constructors for the steel ingots. So on the side that has the limestone coming in, which would be this side over here, the input for the limestone is going to be this here. So what we're going to need to do is take an 8x2, or I'm sorry, not an 8x2, but a 2 wall conveyor here, and then bring up the limestone, again using Mark III lifts, because each of these needing 450, we're going to need to transport the items on the Mark III belts as to not bottleneck the input. Yeah, sorry, a little delay there. Okay, so we have that sorted out, and then on that same side, on the long edge here, if you see, we have 5 foundations here, 5 foundations here. That's where we're going to be putting our constructors. Before we put those in, we want to get the walls in place first. So next to the 2 wall conveyor, we can take a single wall conveyor and build that out 5 times on each side. And then on top of these, we will go ahead and take care of our constructors. And again, hanging off just a little bit, just like that. Maybe that's hanging off a little too much. Hold on 1 second. Yep, that's hanging off. Yep, too far. There we go. Where the little feet here are just hanging off the edge. Now that we have those in place, we can go ahead and get these belted up, and we can just use Mark 1 lifts. And now on the opposite side here, we need 8 constructors to make our steel ingots. So what I'm going to do is to maintain some semblance of symmetry, is the constructors will be placed essentially on these 4 here, so leaving the middle portion here open, and then bringing them all the way over to here. So with that, let's go ahead and get our walls in place yet again. Normal wall here. Normal wall on the ends. And then for our inputs, we have our steel ingots coming up from down below. So we will do a normal wall over here. Double wall conveyor. I'm going to leave this one open so that way we can get inside and do our belt work. But then repeat this on the opposite end. Normal, double, single. Oh, and then might as well go ahead and also get these belted up. Here you can just use the Mark II. Get our constructors in place. And belt it up. Alright, now it's time to do the fun belt work in the middle. So it's not terribly bad. So we have our... Let me get my bearings real quick. So this is where our concrete is coming up. And in this instance, based on the limited space we have available, based on the amount of inputs and belts and whatnot coming up into here, I'm just going to use the simple overflow system. So each of these inputs, so the respective inputs, so this is on the right, and this will feed the constructors on the right. This one over here on the left will feed the one on the left. Pretty simple, straightforward. So let's go ahead and place splitters in front of all of the constructors facing toward the edge. So the orange arrow is essentially facing toward the middle. And you want to make sure when placing the splitters here, they are built in the center and no closer to the edge of our sandwich. Otherwise the belts will not be able to be constructed, leading to the inputs of the constructors. So from there, we can just take 8x1 or 8x1s Mark 1 belts and get these in place. I'm going to go ahead and do it like this. And in between all of these splitters, I would highly recommend using a higher belt speed. It doesn't help a lot, but it does help a little bit in terms of getting the overflow system executed just a little bit faster. Kind of, not really. It's placebo. It's 100% placebo, but I like to do it. So just Mark 1s in the middle, Mark 3s for the splitters, or sorry, Mark 1s for the inputs, and Mark 3s in the middle. Just like that. Repeat the process on the opposite side here. Oh, we don't need a splitter here. You just take it like that. Alright, and the concrete is complete, and now it's time for the steel ingots. And this is relatively simple. So the splitters, we will align in the middle between two of the inputs. And so for this one here, I will bring them essentially to the edge here. And where these two foundations meet, bring those in. Then we can use our Mark II. We get the nice little 90-degree turn. And then for here, just bring it out to the, essentially we had the first splitter here on the edge foundation, and then we're going to bring it to the middle to where it's aligned with this edge here. So that way when we bring our Mark II belt over, we do get the nice 90-degree turn in, and then we just take the Mark I belts and feed them into the inputs. Do the same thing over here. And that is the belting for this. Oh, yeah, we're good. That is the belting for this sandwich layer. And once that is complete, we can go ahead and exit and close that up. And then next it's to get all of the belting for the outputs of the constructor sorted out. So when it comes to doing the belting for the export or the output of these constructors here on the side with the 10 constructors, which is making our concrete, each of these is going to be outputting 15 per minute. And so because we are building this with the Mark III belts, or for the eventual use of the Mark III belts, we can have these all filtering onto one line. And for the next sandwich layer above, we're going to be doing some belting and load balancing. For ease of sake, what we're going to do is having these all merge into the center here. So the ends we can ignore, but then in front of the other constructors facing towards the center, we're going to be putting mergers. Do another merger here facing toward the long edge in the middle here. And then on this side, we'll have the mergers again facing towards the middle for the first 4. And then we can go ahead and get these belted up. And for ease's sake, if you don't want to like take the time to do the math, just do Mark IIs or Mark IIIs in between all of the mergers, like so. Oh, that one's already got a belt on it. Brilliant. And then coming off of this merger, make sure you use a Mark III belt coming straight to the center and the very edge, like so. And then for these constructors over here, we're going to take each pair of 4, running it off toward the short edge. So we're going to take our mergers and ignoring the center 2 constructors, take a merger and have it focused or leading out toward the short edge. Be the process on the other side. Then having these come off and lead into the middle, like so. And then we can go ahead and get our next sandwich layer in place. We're going to build up 3 times this time because the constructors have a little bit of a lower clearance than the foundries. So again, 8x4 foundations, and then next to them do 4 8x1s to get a matching height of the 8x4. Delete the middle 2 and the 8x4 foundations, and again build this out to the same area as below. Just like that. Alright, next up, the way we're going to be placing our assemblers is going to be in order to get some symmetry. And so based on the length of our factory here, what we're going to need is our 5 assemblers. So it'll be 3, 4, and 5. So you can kind of see how those are going to be placed. So we have the one in the middle. And if we have the one in the middle, that means the input for our concrete coming up cannot be on the same side, or at least recommended it is not on the same side based on how tight some of the belting is going to get. So you want the assemblers to be placed on the opposite side of where the concrete will be coming up. But where the concrete is coming up, you want to take a wall conveyor and bring that up like so. And then on each of the short edges, we want to bring up our steel ingots, or I'm sorry, our steel beams at this point. So again, single wall conveyor. Oop, Mark III belt. Repeat as needed on the other side. And then over here, we will be doing our assemblers, but before we get those in place, we do want to get our walls sorted out. So they take 2 inputs, so we'll do essentially normal, 2, all the way down. Go ahead and do a normal and a normal. And then these can all be normal as well. Normal, and then the gap for us to be able to go in and do the belt work. But before we do that, we need to get the assemblers placed. And like everything else, when it comes to placing it, we want it hanging off the edge by just a little bit. And then belt it up. Like so, and time to get our belt work sorted out. So for the steel beams, fairly simple. What we are going to do is take an input, or I'm sorry, an output from one side and essentially do an overflow system into the middle. So we're going to have the orange arrow of the splitter facing toward where the input or the output of the steel beams is coming from. And so here I'm just focusing on and keeping these organized. The left will be for our steel beams. Oh, actually, I take that back 1 second. We want these to be a little bit closer, similar to what we did below. So we want them to be no closer to the edge than the center of the foundations here. And then on the middle one, we'll take a merger instead and face that toward the assembler. And then back to the splitters facing toward the middle. Like so. And then I'm not going to complete the belt here. What we want to do is build our way out. So I'm going to leave that space open. I will address the far end over here at the very least. So I'll hold off on connecting these two together. Now when it comes to the concrete coming up, we are going to do a 1 to 5 load balancer. And so for that, what we're going to do, and this can get a little tricky based on the tight space, so follow along. If you need to just rinse and repeat, you'll take it a step back and watch it, by all means feel free. I will also have a link in the description below to an image that shows this balancing system, should that be easier for you to follow along. Actually, better yet, I'm going to put it on the screen right now. Although I guess it would help to actually be able to look at it. Well, okay, yeah, there's the image for you. You can follow that and kind of how I'm setting it up here. So what we're going to do first is we are going to take a splitter in the middle of the foundation, the orange arrow where the concrete is coming up. In front of that, we're going to take a merger, and the merger will be facing away from that splitter, so toward the assemblers on the opposite side. And then in front of that, we're going to take a splitter again and facing off in that same direction. Next up, we're going to take a merger, and this will be facing away, so we want, from our perspective, the green arrow facing toward us. And then next to that, we're going to take a splitter, the input facing toward us. So the orange arrow we want on our side here. And then in front of the splitter, we want it again, but we're going to take the orange arrow and put it on the side where the concrete, so the concrete's up here, on the side where the concrete is coming up. Now, what we're going to do, in sake of ease, we have the 150 concrete coming up. So it's safe to say, go ahead and use Mark III belts for pretty much all of this. And so essentially we're connecting everything together in between everything, like so. So let's just make sure. Okay, we got splitter to merger, merger to splitter, merger to splitter, splitter to, or merger, splitter to splitter, sorry, and splitter to merger, and then we're going to connect the merger into the splitter. And then from this splitter here, we're going to run our concrete all the way down to this one here. So bring this over, two-step, then we're going to change sides and connect like that, so that way we can come back over to here. This middle one will be feeding this assembler here, so we'll bring this out. Let's see, 1, 2. Flip on the other side, connect there. The output from this side of the splitter will connect with that assembler here in our middle. And then the output from this splitter, which will be this side and this side, this one will connect to here. So we'll bring it over. 1, 2. Whoop, that's 3. 1, 2. And get that connected in. And then bring this one all the way down and over. 1, 2. And connect it in like that. And then bring our splitter that we have for our steel beams and bring it over. And that is all of the belt work. So the 1 to 5 is a little tedious. If you don't want to do that, you can use it overflow. You're just going to have to wait for the whole system to ramp up, but it will eventually do so. We can now close this off. And now we just have to essentially merge all of the outputs from the assembler together, and we can call it a day. And I just realized a critical error in this design process. Everything is flipped. I lied. We're good. We're good. It took me a second. We're good. Sorry for the delay. Technical errors. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a merger, place it in front of our middle assembler, and honestly, at this point, the output is entirely up to you. The nice, clean kind of way that I'm going to be approaching it, should you so choose, is to do this. So take a merger in front of your middle assembler. Take another merger in front of this one, facing toward that one in the middle. Again, mirroring it on the same side, or opposite side. And then connecting these up. So I'm bringing out 2. Connect. Connect. And just getting these... Oh, did I face that merger in the wrong? Yes, I did. Apologies. Face this in direction where it's facing toward the long edge where the concrete's coming up. Now we can get this connected up properly. And 1, 2. Alright, so now we have all of our mergers sorted out. Easy peasy. And then what we're going to do is take a lift here, bring it up to essentially where that red, where you see the little energy or the activity indicator. Red means no power. Bring that up and over. And then what we're going to do all the way back down here, this middle wall, we're going to replace it. But before we do that, let's head to the inside. And so this is where you can kind of see why we have this single wall conveyor here. So we have our Mark III belt. Technically it only just needs to be a Mark I. But we're going to essentially have a wall conveyor here like that. This will connect together. Then if we head back out, we'll take a lift from here, bring it all the way back up, right threading the needle between these two lifts here, and up to the same elevation as that lift over there, and connect the two together. So what this means is the encased steel beams will come up, over, and then all the way down, inside, and then out below the walkable area to wherever you so choose as you need it. So I am very happy to say at this point, this is effectively build complete. All I need to do now is run some power, and also on the new experimental build that has made it so much cleaner. Run some power, put some glass walls on the outside, call it a day. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do. I will see you guys on the other side. Alright, and that'll wrap up our guide. I hope you guys found a lot of value in this tutorial. If you did, feel free to leave a like, it does help out the channel. And if you want to see more content in the future, be sure to subscribe. And if there's anything you want to see specifically in the future, or if you have any questions about this build, leave a comment below, and I'll see what I can do and try and answer you as best I can. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Take care. You bring them to where they're hanging over the edge just a little bit. And that's actually the output. Let's go ahead and flip this around, yeah? You spin me right round, baby, right round, like a record player, round, round, right round. So we have 480 divided by 12 is 40. Maybe? Math? Let me double check that. I could be wrong. 480 divided by 12 is 40. Cool. I was correct. And have the output be at the top. Like so. And then this will feed. Why is that not working? What?